This is the first video for Japanese 1000 level class. This is the video for Hiragana A through Ko. The first thing I want to explain though is I want to give a brief introduction to the Japanese writing system. There are 3 writing systems in Japanese. That's what we call orthographies in linguistic speech. There are 2 syllabic alphabets, what we also call syllabaries. That's similar to ABC, where each character represents a sound, so it's phonetic based. The first syllabary is hiragana, which is used for Japanese words. A lot of times if you have a kanji that represents a verb, hiragana will be used for the verb ending. It's used for adjectival endings as well, so conjugating verbs, conjugating adjectives, hiragana is very important. And then the second syllabary is katakana. Katakana is used for loan words, things like terebi, or onomatopoeia, things like bam or meow, which are just animal sounds and sounds of like knock knock and whatnot. And then there are Chinese characters, that's kanji. Chinese characters are logographic, where each character represents basically a word, a phrase, or a meaning. Now on the page here I have, for example, the hiragana syllabary here, so you can see it all laid out. It's very swirly looking, and if you look at katakana, it has a very different look. It has more angular, sharp, and then of course kanji is the most difficult in the sense that it has lots of strokes, and of course looks very Chinese. Now any one of these, and actually all 3 of these, can be used in any given sentence in Japanese. So if you're writing something like I went to the store, I can be written in kanji, store can be written in kanji, went will be half in kanji, half in hiragana. Katakana would require a loan word, like maybe I watch television. Television would be in katakana. So today we're introducing the hiragana syllabary, and that's on the next page. So this is the hiragana chart, and it goes from top to bottom, as it says right here, orders from top to bottom and right to left. So we're going to start here with A, and then it's I, U, E, O. So that's the first column. And then it goes ka, ki, ku, ke, ko. And then sa, shi, su, se, so. Notice here, this is quite interesting, si is not a sound that exists in traditional Japanese language. Not that they can't pronounce it, but you won't find any words in traditional Japanese that have shi in it. Ta, chi, tsu, te, to, where again you have some differences. You have, instead of ti, you have chi. Instead of tu, you have tsu. So ti and tu do not exist in traditional Japanese. In the next column, it's fairly straightforward. It's na, ni, nu, ne, no. And the next column, a little bit tricky. You have ha, hi, hu, he, ho. Now, if you noticed, hu is romanized as fu. That's not very nice, but anyway, and hu. That doesn't really quite represent the sound. It's more of a whu. So in English, although we say, for example, Mount Fuji, in Japanese that is actually pronounced Fuji, like a whu sound. So even though it's romanized as fu or hu, the pronunciation isn't quite that. The next column is ma, mi, mu, me, mo, pretty straightforward. And then you have ya, you, and yo. And you'll notice that a couple of these are missing. So this used to be ya, yi, you, ye, yo, but yi has since morphed into just e, and you has since morphed into e. Now this is quite interesting because if previously they did have a ye, they did have a yi, in fact that's where we get the word yen from, which now is actually pronounced in Japanese, modern Japanese, as en rather than yen. The next column is actually the hardest column in terms of pronunciation for most people. If you know Spanish, you probably won't have any trouble with this, but it's da, di, ru, de, do. Notice that this is romanized as an R, but this is not pronounced ra, ri, ru, re, ro. In fact, that's the worst mistake you can make when speaking Japanese, because Japanese, as you can tell from the chart already, does not have an L sound, and it technically doesn't have an R sound. Why they romanized it as an R sound here, I'm not sure. It's very confusing, but it's a Spanish tap. It's like a soft D sound. You just tap the back of your teeth. Da, di, do, de, do. And the worst thing you could do in Japanese is pronounce something like arigato, which means thank you, as arigato. In fact, Japanese can't even really process this sound, so you'd be very difficult to understand. Next column over, you have wa. Notice that these are missing, so you don't have we, you don't have woo, you don't have we, and you have something that is romanized as wo, which a very few people pronounce it as wo. It's actually pronounced as o. And then we have the star of the show over here in the very last column. That's n, and it is the only letter, it is the only consonant in Japanese to be written by itself. As you notice, everything else includes a consonant and a vowel construction. So that's why we call it a syllabary as well, that each one of these represents a syllable. Okay, and I'll explain this part a little bit later. This part we'll get to towards the end of our study of hiragana. So we're moving on to how to write these particular characters. To watch a video on IUAO, I think this is a very good video. Go to youtube.com. It's a Japanese Pod 101 podcast, but they put it on YouTube. It's quite good. So the first character is a, and as you can see, I have a couple of different things on here. I have the stroke order up in the left-hand corner. So I'm going to move that over to the stroke order area. And so in your hiragana book, your kana book, it'll show you this exact same thing, but I'm just going to show you here as well. So this has 3 strokes. This is your first stroke. If I can get this to work. Okay, so there's your first stroke. Second stroke. And third stroke is rather curly. Now, some of the mnemonic devices, so when I say mnemonic, I mean strategy. Some of the strategies that people have posted online include, for example, this one. A, I see the letter A where you see A right here within the letter. I think that one's really difficult. This one is Anne is good at skating, showing somebody sort of on skates with their leg up, but maybe kind of a swirly motion. And then you have someone opens their mouth for the doctor and says, ah. I didn't really like any of these actually, but if they help you, that's great. But what I'd really like to show you is the one I use. And so the one I use is this one, where you have a fish on a hook. So this is kind of the rudimentary hook right here, and this is the fish. Now notice that the fish does not look like this. That is not the fish. The fish is more like an angelfish, so it has that tail that comes out, and that's really important because this character actually has a big sort of curvy part right here. So I don't want to see something like this. Okay, there are a couple things wrong with this one. First of all, it's not as straight as this. They're both curved, right? They're sort of curved a little bit, and then you have the big tail there. So if you're going to use that particular strategy, then remember that there's a lot of curviness involved in this one. Next character is E. This is a fairly simple character. Something you should know about some of the writing of these characters is that they sometimes have hooks on them. Now notice if you look up in the left-hand corner here, you'll see, for example, that this has a hook right here. And what that hook represents is if people are writing traditional Japanese with sumi, which is a type of ink, and traditional brushes, like paint brushes, then you get that particular hook, and that's where that comes from. And it also does represent, if you're writing it in pen, that you're basically lifting up your pen at that point and then bringing it down the next stroke. So here's the first stroke. Oops, sorry. Here's the first stroke right here. You're going to come down, you lift up your pen with that little hook, and then you come over on this side. Notice that this side is a lot, well, not a lot shorter, but it's a little bit shorter than this one. Doesn't have a hook as well. Some of the strategies for this that I found online are the two eels right here, a couple of eels. So this represents the shape as well as the sound of this character, which I think is, if you're going to use strategies, you really should connect the shape with something that you remember, but that also represents the sound of the character. I also like this one, which is Hawaii, the two eyes in Hawaii. Although I did have some student who memorized that, and when they wrote it like this. They actually put the dots up there, and I think that was just that they remembered it so well. Anyway, the dots do not belong there. And as you can see, in some of the typewritten of these, that, for example, this one, the big one in the middle of the page, it looks like, rather than a hook, it just looks like a curve. However, when you write it, you are probably going to write it more like this. You're going to have that hook in there. Ooh. Ooh is pretty easy. Looking up in the left-hand corner here, it's got two strokes. It's one, that stroke goes down. Sometimes people write a little more flatly. I wouldn't do it like this so much, but it goes down like this, and then it comes over like that. I like to think of this one as what your mouth looks like when you say ooh. Okay, so that's your mouth, and then this could be sort of the bottom of your nose if you want to think of it that way. Then, of course, your eyes are up here. So that's my strategy for that one. Although here are some other ones. There's ooh, as in, I got hit by a baseball in the gut. That one's okay. Anyway, whichever one you prefer, and if you come up with any others, you want to share them in class, that's great. We often have people come up with things. In fact, the more absurd they are, the more likely people are to remember them. This is E. Now, sometimes this is romanized, or not really romanized, but represented as EH. I think it sounds more like an AY, though. In certain circumstances, it might sound like an EH. Certain circumstances might sound like an AY. Anyway, upper left-hand corner here, we have two strokes. The first one's fairly easy. You've got this little downward stroke again, just like the previous character. And then you come up like this for the second stroke, down and back over again. This part right here sort of looks like an H. There's not as much space in here as there would be in a cursive H, though. And some of the strategies for this one, you got an exotic bird shaped like that. I guess this is sort of the plume up here, represents the plume, and then you have the shape of the bird, and then perhaps the wing right here. That's kind of a good mnemonic. Another one that I like is, where'd it go? Sorry. Right down here is the shape of a snake. Now, the person who created this one, I guess, assumed that maybe this part right here would be represented by the apple. I don't know. You can also think of that as the hat that goes on top of the snake. So here's a little hat. There's the snake. Maybe he lost his hat. I don't know. Okay. O. This is O. And up here in the left-hand corner, you can see that it has 3 strokes. And the first stroke is this one right here. And then you have one that kind of comes up and around. And then you have that third one there. And that one, this one right here goes down. I think what's tricky about this one for people is I often see something like this. I see that first stroke, then I see that second stroke, and people break it up and they go like this. Okay, so I can often see that they're writing it incorrectly. This should be that second stroke should be one fluid movement. And then you have that third stroke up here. I sometimes put that stroke down here. Sometimes it's individual preference, but really probably should be up here if you're writing it 100% correctly. Some of the strategies for this are this one right here where it says the 2-letter symbols right here. I think that one's a little hard because it leaves off quite a bit of the character. So this one down here I like a little bit more, and that is, oh, I got a hole in one. So you can see here, for example, that this is the flag. That part obviously isn't represented, but think of it this way. And then you have the pole, and then they've left off the whole portion. I think it looks good. This part right here, or this part right here, is the hole. And this is the green, and then this is the ball itself, which is represented by a stroke rather than an actual circle. Next, I really have sort of an exercise on how to read. So, yomimashou is let's try to read. So, kore o yomimashou, let's try to read this. So this would be u, and then you have, which is the shape of your mouth as you say u, or whatever strategy you chose to remember that by. And then you have e, which is two eels, or the end of Hawaii. Then you have O. So as I go along here, you could just sort of guess with me, and hopefully I give you a little bit of space to think about it for a second or two. And this one is Ah. Notice how close these two are. Okay, so be careful about those. It's easy to mix them up. And then you have, right, which is the shape of a snake with a hat on. For this part right here, I wanted to see whether or not you could try to write it. You can pause the video right now and you can get out a piece of paper and you can write them down, and then you can watch this portion and see whether or not you got them right. Okay, so this first one is E, which means good or okay. So it's in the phrase you might hear me say in class, "ii desu ka," which means is it good? Is it okay? And that is, remember our two eels? Sorry, this stylus writes terribly. Apparently that's going to be rubbish, so just pay attention to the stuff that was already on the pages before. I is going to be ah, with I caught a fish, and e. And then ue is the shape of your mouth, with either the mustache or the nose, the bottom of the nose. E, like that. So that should be more sort of down on both of those. And you have ie, which is the eels, and the snake. And you have au, ah, I caught a fish, and the shape of your mouth as you say ooh. And then ah, I caught a fish. Oh, I got a hole in one, right? There's the ball and there's the green. There's the flag. Aoi means blue. Okay, next. So the next column that we go down is kakiku keiko, and if you wanted to watch the YouTube video on this, you can access it on YouTube, and that's Japanese Pod 101. The first character is ka, and up in the left-hand corner you see the stroke order right here. This is also available in your hiragana book, but I'll just go ahead and show you here. Notice that this is the stroke that goes first. This is the first stroke. Then you have the second stroke, and then you have this stroke right here. So that's ka. Couple of strategies for this one is like cut the sausage. I don't really like this one very much, but if you feel that this is helpful, I think this one right here at the bottom is helpful. Someone who's doing the can dance. So it invokes a sound as well. So you can see this is the shape of her leg as she's kind of kicking it up. This is her body and her other leg. And then you have kind of a motion stroke right there. And that is ka. So somebody who's doing the can. Ki. Ki is one of my favorite. A little bit tricky though. So up here in the left-hand corner, you will see that there are 4 strokes, to ki. And you have 1, those horizontal strokes go first, and then you bring 3 down and it lifts up. So there is a bit of a hook there, and you want to put that in there. That's quite important. And you bring it down here as if you had done this, sort of a dotted line all the way to that bottom stroke. However, you will notice that the one that I have in the middle of the page, this type written font actually has that connected. Don't write it like that. It looks really funny. It looks like a kindergartner's writing. You're going to write it like this. You're going to do those 2 horizontal strokes. You're going to do the 3rd stroke, bring it up and over like this. This is how I write it fast. I write it like that, so you barely even see that hook. A lot of people tend to write it like this. They bring this stroke over a little bit too far. It should be more this way. So this is what it should look like. Mnemonic devices for this. Key looks like a shape of a kind of a key. I like this one. In fact, both of these look like that. You have that, and then you have this. Just remember that this is actually not connected here. You don't want to write that connected. That looks rather funny. Here's ku. This is probably the easiest character in all of the hiragana series. You can see that it has 1 stroke. And so you're just going to do this, like that. Don't write it like this, where you have obviously a break there. You're just going to write it as 1 stroke. And this is the shape of a cuckoo bird's beak. So quite easy. I like this one too. It looks like a keg. That's our strategy for this one. And you have 3 strokes. You got 1. Now, I don't necessarily include this hook. Some hooks are important in characters, and some hooks kind of fall away naturally. And then like this. Okay, so you've got 1, 2, 3. And this is, as I mentioned, the shape of a keg. So you've got 1, 2, 3. And if you want to think of this as the spout, where the beer comes out. Okay. Notice, for example, that this one does not have the hook on it. So that's what I was saying, is sometimes people make the hook, sometimes they don't. I tend to think this one looks better without a hook, and it's not really that necessary. So we have ko next, and ko is a bit tricky just because you have to lift up the pen in a weird way. Notice right here on the screen, left-hand corner, you've got 2 strokes. You've got 1 and then 2. So this is as if this is lifting up and coming back over to the starting point right here and finishing over here. The mnemonic for this I really like is this one right here, where it's a coin, and you kind of get that shape there. You've got a little hook. That hook is actually fairly important here. You'll see it in almost every type font. Not like K, where the hook doesn't seem to be important. Ko seems to require a hook for some reason. Although, look, it's not here either, is it? But then you see it at the bottom one right here. This is another mnemonic. Ko is a couple of cohabitating worms. That's a pretty good one too, I guess. Notice here on the middle one, the big one in the middle of the page, you do have the hook. It's quite pronounced. More importantly, though, it seems that a lot of them have this kind of real sharp turn right here. I write mine like this, basically. So my hook tends to be fairly pronounced. Notice that this bottom stroke is a lot bigger than this top stroke. Okay, so one thing that you can do to different characters is you can add what's called dakuten or 10-10. So when I say 10-10, what I mean is just these 2 strokes right here. Just looks like that. We call them dots in English, but they're really little strokes. So they're added to certain characters to make those characters voiced. So they're added to voiceless characters in order to make them voiced. So for example, a k is unvoiced and a g is voiced. Now you can tell the difference between unvoiced and voiced if you put your hand on your throat to feel the vibration. So if you say k, k, you don't feel any vibrations, but if you say g, g, there are some vibrations, so that's what makes it voiced. You're activating your voice box as you say it. So ka, if you add dakuten or 10-10, you get ga. So notice that's where the 10-10 comes on that one. And of course, for other characters, you will also find that this happens. So the sa column, you have sa, shi, su, se, so. If you add a 10-10 to all of those, you get za, ji, zu, ze, zo. For T, you have ta, chi, tsu, te, to, but if you add 10-10 to all those characters, you get da, ji, zu, de, do. Okay, so we'll go over those individually as we go over those particular characters. So just to give you an idea, here is ka, right? The can, doing the can. And here are your two strokes, your dakuten or your 10-10. So often refer to this as ka 10-10, and that would be ga. Same thing with ki. If you have ki 10-10, you have gi. So keep the mnemonics for all of these, but just remind yourself then if you're going to add a 10-10, it goes from K to G. So ku 10-10 is gu. Ge 10-10 is going to be gay. Sorry, K 10-10 is going to be gay. And then for this one, of course, ko 10-10 is go. And we're going to practice a little bit here. So in Japanese, I have written up here, yomimashou. Yomimashou means let's read. So stop the video right now. See if you can go through and pronounce all of these, read all of these, and then go through and play it so that you can hear me read them. So the first one's going to be koe. The next one is egao. Then you have red, which is akai. Persimmon in Japanese is kaki. Right? So notice then you have the can person, and then you have the shape of the key, so kaki. So as you read them, try to remember your mnemonic device. So a female name, a common female name is akiko. Foreign country, notice we have one here that has the 10-10 on it, so it's ka, 10-10. That equals ga, and so it's ga, I, ko, ku, gaikoku. To write in Japanese is kaku. And science is ka, and then we have a ga here because it's ka 10-10, kagaku. Kagaku, kagaku. And then a name, I think this can also be a female name too. You have I caught a fish, and you have the shape of a key, and it's aki. これをちょっと書きましょう. Let's write this. 書きましょう. And what I want you to do here is pause the video, write it on a piece of paper, and then when you're ready to check your answers, press play. So you have koe. Ko is the shape of a coin. I have that little hook there, but I can't seem to make it. E is the shape of the snake with the tail. Egao, so again, snake with the tail. Ga, the can person. But here you have 10-10. Good for you if you remembered it. Egao. Egao. And O is, remember, O, I got a hole in one. Akai is I caught a fish. Ka, can person. And then E was either eels or the end of Hawaii. But don't put the dots up here. Kaki. Ka for the can, and ki for the shape. Now notice how I lift it up and bring it down here. You have akiko, caught a fish. Ki, oops. Sorry about that. Ki, oops, that's not looking too good. I'm going to scratch that one out. Ki, ko. Okay, akiko, coin. Remember this one is the shape of a coin. And you have gaikoku, so it's ka 10-10. I, ko, ku, gaikoku. Kaku is ka, can, and then ku for cuckoo bird's beak. And ka, ga, ku, cuckoo bird's beak again, and aki. So I caught a fish, and ki. Now, I didn't include some of the other, like gagi gugego. So I'll just kind of move it over to the side. So ge would be ちょっと待って。Ge is ke, 10, and you have ko, 10 is go, kagi gu, gu, 10, and gi, 10. And lastly, I just wanted to point out there are lots of hiragana resources online, some apps as well that are very helpful. I'm sure some of you probably looked this up already. One of my favorites is tofugu.com. They have some really great stuff. This right here has some mnemonic pages on it. Guidetojapanese.org, Learning Complete Hiragana, that's a good one. Also, yesjapan.com has some available resources, audio charts and games, and you can become a member for free. Some of the apps that students have told me about for iPad or iPhone, you have Hiragana Writing Challenge by DGPG, and then for iPhone, iPad, and Android, you have Dr. Moko's Hiragana Mnemonics. I really like this one. The light versions, I believe, are free. Otherwise, for the full version, you have to pay for it. And if you find some sites that you think are really helpful, please let me know, and I'll forward those links to students in class. Also, I just want to point out the Hiragana mnemonic charts. There are 3 of them that I've downloaded from the web. Actually, I think I have a 4th one as well that's not pictured here, and those are available on the website under Lesson 1. A couple more hiragana resources, a hiragana chart with animation to show you the different, the stroke order, a little bit more perfect than what I can do with my stylus. And there are some hiragana flashcards, I believe, that you can print out. But nowadays you can find apps with hiragana flashcards to use with your phone. And I believe that's it. We're at the end of the video. Thank you.